Right, now that we've got the regulator in the cylinder, I'll just talk about a few things with the as far as power adjustment and what have you goes. The what I tend to do with these is I try and set the power around 12 foot-pounds using the HuMa, and then I turn it down to 11.5 wherever I want it with the little Venturi screw on the side. That way you're not restricting the board so much, and it improves the efficiency, so you get a few more shots per fill. Obviously, if you wanted to tighten up the spread and you're not so worried about the shot count, then you could turn the power up more with the HuMa and then restrict it more with this, which basically just means it's going to be less efficient, but in theory it should give you a tighter spread. One thing to check: if you have air leaking out of your barrel, either before or after fitting HuMa regulator, good chance it's the firing valve, knockoff valve, exhaust valve, call it what you like. It sits inside there, and if there's any sort of damage or dirt embedded in this face, it won't seal properly. So you need to check that, make sure there's no scratches or dents. If there are, you can chuck it up in a lathe or in a drill, and then just dress this front face with some wet and dry, some very fine wet and dry, or something along those lines. The same applies here. Just make sure that there's no dirt or debris on this face that this firing valve seals on. Then next thing to note is, if you want to make sure your Venturi is fully open before you start setting things, you can remove that grub screw like I've done, pull the bolt back, and then you can shine a light in, and you should be able to see how far that little Venturi screw is poking into the transfer port, because that hole goes straight through into there. I don't know if you're going to be able to see that, but basically it goes through there and through there into where the firing valve sits. So that's a little tip for you. And then as far as adjusting the power goes, on these normally there's a little metal disc covering this hole here. You would need to center punch and drill a hole in that to allow you to get an Allen key in, because there is a locking grub screw in there, and you won't be able to adjust the power unless you loosen off the grub screw. You don't have to remove it completely, just back it off, and then that should allow you to adjust your HuMa. Now these normally have a shear bolt on them, so basically they set the power and then they snap the end off so that you can't adjust it. Sometimes you can adjust it just purely by hand, and in fact this one's turning with my finger, but it's, you know, sometimes it helps if you use a little piece of rubber tube or something to get a bit more grip on it. If yours is stuck, which often they're not so easy to move like this one, you could use a little ball attachment on a rotary tool like a Dremel. That's got a little ball on it, and you can grind a little hole in on one side, and then you can then get something like a center punch or a pin punch into that hole, and then just gently tap the power adjuster to where you want it. What I tend to do is remove them completely and then slot them, and then put them back in. That way in the future, if you ever need to make adjustments, you can use a flat screwdriver. It just makes life a lot easier. So there we go, that's that, and I'll just quickly put this back together. Firing valve goes in, again, make sure it's nice and clean, no dirt, no debris caught anywhere. Spring sits on top of that. I find it's easier to hold this upright and then screw this on, that way the spring doesn't fall over and get squashed in there. Once it's together, the guide either end will hold the spring in place. This doesn't need to be gorilla tight. The O-rings do the sealing. It's not a question of how tightly you can tighten it. Then barrel goes in. Again, another tip is there are little detents on the top of the barrel. and then obviously the transfer port on the bottom. If you leave the screw out when you come to put this back in, you can line up that little detent that you can see there, make sure it's in the right place and that you're happy, and then you can tighten up the one grub screw, and then you can pop the other one in. To just make sure that when you put it back together the barrel's in the correct place, otherwise your probe won't seal properly, or it'll seal too much, in which case your power will be low. Chroning your rifle regularly. I will say with regulators, not just the HuMa regulator, most regulators, they're not designed for rapid firing. So if you're going to do a chrono session, chrono at the same speed that you would normally shoot at. So, load, aim, fire, not, bang, 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 because the regulator just doesn't get a chance to cycle properly in between shots. So there we go.